Hello.
Oh, hi. Oh, everyone's waving at me. That's really fun. All right, everyone. I think we're going to kick this off here. We're just waiting for a couple of people to come on up the stairs. Excuse me. Oh, hi. I love seeing all these faces that I recognize in the audience. This is really great. A couple of people are still checking in, but that doesn't mean I can't introduce the evening. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Katie Dolgoff, Director of Exhibitions and Collections here at the museum. And I have the pleasure of being part of the team that works with Artist Alliance to create programming that brings visibility and growth opportunities to artists in our region. They are a vital part of helping us fulfill our mission here to share the art and stories of Southern California artists. Thank you. Yes, applause for Artist Alliance. So this evening we have 5 amazing SoCal artists here as part of the presentation. Obviously, so many more than 5 in our audience. Each of these artists are exploring the developing field of generative artificial intelligence in the arts, and I'm going to let them tell you what that means if you don't know already. We are honored to host this potentially provocative conversation. Like many of our exhibitions, we like our programs to be a platform for conversations about relevant, groundbreaking topics such as AI as we evolve with the changing landscape of technology, art, and culture. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how our moderator and panelists approach this topic that's going to lead conversations into the future. So we're really, really proud to host what promises to be a fascinating discussion in collaboration with Artist Alliance, and I especially want to thank and call out independent curator Valo Roberto. He's standing at the back, for proposing this wonderful idea, confirming the participants, supporting us in every way to make this possible. I also want to thank the entire Artist Alliance Planning Council, many of whom are here this evening, especially council chairs Larry Vogel and Barb Runge, and council member Wanda Brown, for their programmatic leadership. So thank you all so much. And of course, many, many thanks to the OMA staff, volunteers, and the board for making events like this possible. And I know many of you are members, but if you're not a member yet, some of these people got a really deep discount on their things here. So you should consider joining the family and getting that discount on programs in the future. And a lot of the stuff we do here is free for members, so definitely, I think you should be a member. On that note, please silence your cell phones. If you think they're silent, maybe, just double check, couldn't hurt. If you want to use the restroom during the talk, it is downstairs and to the right of the elevator. And now, I am proud to introduce our moderator for the evening, multimedia artist and designer, Greg Klim. Greg Klim.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you all for being here. This is an exciting topic. It's really great to be here with this panel. Thanks to the museum for putting this together and Valo for conceiving of this idea. We're here to talk about AI-generated art. And from the first AI-generated art created in the late 1960s by Harold Cohen at UC San Diego, the field has obviously exponentially grown since that time and evolved. And our focus tonight is going to be on a small portion of AI, which is what we're calling very accessible text-to-image generative AI applications. And this includes Midjourney, DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion, and applications like that. And there are dozens of other ones that are out there, and there will be dozens more tomorrow. Though some of the underlying technology has been publicly available for a number of years, it just became much more usable and better quality last year. There are also other apps that synthesize words and music and even computer code. and there will be more things that it touches upon. And it just takes a quick, simple prompt, and it only takes a few minutes to get some results. So it's really changing a lot of the fields of creativity. We're going to stay focused in on the visual art of it, though it's going to touch on some of these others in the topics we're going to cover. And suddenly, AI was propelled last year into the realm of all of us and out of the realm of programmers. And this dynamic change in technology, anytime we have change in technology, we have difficulty adjusting, figuring out what it is, how it works, and what to do with it. And this creates these tensions. So we'll be talking a little bit about those. One of those tensions in my mind is AI creative or is it destructive? And I used an AI to create these two images, just kind of using AI to mock itself and to mock myself and these tensions in my brain and the encompassing that polarized set of responses that we're seeing in the news and the media and over social media and in conversations with artists and friends and musicians that I know who are worried about how this affects what they do and their careers and these fears and anxieties and misunderstandings and even contempt and demonization that I've seen, as well as a lot of excitement. And then there's people who are commenting they don't want to go to art school because there's no point in it now. They can't compete with these programs. And that's a terribly sad thing because in my mind, creativity that is in all of us precedes any technology that exists. And so we're going to talk to you about that juncture of creativity and technology a bit tonight. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with these applications, Larry created this short video I'm going to put on that gives you a little glimpse into Midjourney, which is just one of the different apps. They all work a little bit different, have different interfaces, but this is one of the most popular ones.
There are many AI image generators to choose from. Let's take a look at Midjourney. We begin with the prompt imagine, and we add in our own prompt after that. I'm going to go with a simple command like old woman, and we enter that. And AI delivers back 4 variations based on the old woman prompt. Our next step here is to decide which one we would like to work with. I think I'm going to select number 1, and AI will go to work on that one and upscale it, and delivers back this image here, then fully upscaled. As we zoom in, you'll see there's lots of great details in the image. Pretty amazing. As you can see, it's all about the prompts. So this time I'm going to take the same prompt, old woman, and I'm going to add some extra details to it, like standing in her old house, detailed photo quality, cinematic lighting, and this time I'm going to add an aspect ratio of 9:16. That will bring us back a vertical image, as you see here. 4 new variations, all in the vertical format. Again, we will choose which one we want to work with. This time I think I'm going to look at number 3 in the lower left-hand corner, and I will ask AI to upscale that image. And when it comes back, here it is. Lots of detail. Next, I will ask it to use the same prompts, but this time use the aspect ratio of 16:9. You see we get back a horizontal image. So here are the 3 versions that we just created. Upper left is our 1:1 ratio. Lower left is our 16:9 horizontal, and on the right, our 9:16 vertical. I just want to say thank you, Midjourney, and thank you, AI.
My 2 new friends.
That's true.
Thanks, Larry, for putting that together. In the video, you see how simple this is to create really amazing images in just a few minutes. It's not quite that quick, but it's phenomenally quick. And it doesn't take a lot of creativity, it doesn't take a lot of artistic talent or experience to be able to create beautiful images. Now, you can also see this transformation when somebody like Larry, who has creativity and talent and experience, takes those images and combines them together and puts his artistic vision back into the work and does something else with it. And we've just barely begun to see what can be done with that. Before we get any further, I want to find out who all of you are. By a raise of hands, how many of you are visual artists? Right on. How many photographers? Musicians? Not a lot of musicians. How many are writers? Programmers? So all of you will be affected, or may have already been affected in some way, and this technology will come into other areas of life as well. How many have not played with any of these AI art applications? Wow, great. You're in the right place. So you'll get an idea of what these things are. And part of our goal is to encourage people to go out there and play with them, understand them. This ease of use is already changing how we create, what we create, who can create, and the nature of art itself. And it leaves a lot of questions unanswered. It impacts careers and aesthetics and education, the law, media, information and disinformation. And we're going to be focusing a little bit on some of those areas tonight. We could be here for 3 or 4 days talking about these things, but we'll try to keep it concise. Artists are understandably worried about being replaced by this technology and having their work stolen. We don't really know how the job market is going to be affected. We don't understand the law on AI because it hasn't been invented yet. But it is certainly in the courts. But this hasn't been the first time that technology has changed, that a revolution has come along. And I've spent 40 years using computers to do art, and it's a constant evolution of learning new things, finding new ways to think, new ways to create, and use the tools to make more beautiful things. And we've seen these places in the past where when photography started coming into existence in the early 1800s, and there were threats to portrait photographers because now there was this quick, easy way to make portraits, and people were afraid of getting put out of business. But photography was simply a recording at that time, and it wasn't seen as art. And then the tools got better, and people got better, and they learned how to put themselves into that work, and then eventually it started becoming more artistic, more accepted as art, and we will find more of that with this art, these images, whatever you want to call them, however you feel about that at this point. And this is a set of images that I prompted in AI in the last month or so. Most of them are composites of a variety of different images. And when 2 or 3 months ago, I was still not willing to touch this stuff. I had played with some AI years ago, and I just wasn't interested in things where the computer was doing all the work. But I started playing with this thing because I figured if I'm going to be up here talking to you tonight, I should probably know something about it. But this, when I look at this work and I compare it to what I've been doing and working on for 40 years, I feel threatened by it. I feel uncertain. I doubt myself. I doubt my capabilities. I question if it's really my art, whether I'm comfortable signing this work. I wonder sometimes, can I really call it art at all? And I don't know where the images came from. if they're original, if they're derivative from something else, whose style was used to create this. And a lot of things that I used to believe about art, I'm finding are not true. And on the other hand, I am more excited and creatively inspired than I've been in years. And just the doors and the accidents that it opens up for me as a creator and pushing me to find new ways to think about it have been great. So you may have similar experiences for those of you who played with it. You may have encountered some of different opinions online. We really hope tonight to clarify some of the misinformation and to disarm some of the alarm about this technology, to let go of some of the bigotries about it, and encourage each other and get you to go out and encourage your friends to understand it, to not be afraid of it, to be creative, to explore and make more beautiful stuff. So I'm gonna, in order to address these issues, I'm gonna have the panel introduce themselves and what they have been doing briefly with AI. We all have different ways of approaching things, and sometimes the technology can seem daunting when I see something new, but results are always shaped by our experiences and our skill and our creativity and collaboration, and all of you being here is a wonderful step in that direction. So I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask them some questions, and then we're going to open up to audience questions after that. So our first artist is Memo Acton.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Greg. And hi everyone, thanks for coming. Yeah, that's me. So I've been working with AI for many years. AI comes in many different flavors, which we will probably get into later. Actually, the version of AI that we're talking about today is a very, very narrow sliver of what AI really is. And I've been working with the more broader theme of AI for close to 20 years. And my interest really in AI, I guess like many people, started as a kid with like Isaac Asimov stories and stuff like that. But apart from the sci-fi component, I'm very interested in creating interactive systems, interactive generative systems that respond, quote unquote, intelligently to the humans around them. So for a system to be able to respond, quote unquote, intelligently, the system needs to understand, again, that's a very loaded word, what it is that the person is doing or wants to do. So I've been working a lot with computer vision, with computer perception, and various different algorithms. Really, I don't call myself an AI artist. I call myself a new media artist. I work with new media, I work with computational technologies, and AI is just one part of that picture. And I got so interested in this round about 10 years ago. I decided I should do a PhD in this, because this is going to be big, because I saw how everything was developing. So I ended up getting a PhD in AI and art, or like the creative applications of AI rather. Little did I know that it was going to get as big as it has, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and crazier and crazier. And I think I can end it there and pass it on.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next guest is Stephen Burns, who I've known for 25 years or so.
Yeah, so I'm Stephen Burns. Thank you, Greg. What you're looking at here is a program called NMKD. So various artists are working with AI, different styles of AI or different versions of AI. I'm working with something like a stable diffusion-based engine. Greg mentioned earlier that he was concerned as to whether he would feel comfortable putting his name on a piece of art that was done by AI. I had that same exact concern. So my focus was to figure out a way to put my own personal signature on my work. I think that's probably most people's concern here. So Greg, I want to have you go to the next slide. So I figured when I was looking at AI work, most of it was very, how should I put it, noisy. In other words, most people are using 15, 20, 25 or more prompts or keywords to produce a product. So I figured, why don't I quiet it down? Let's not make it so noisy. Let me use one or two and see what it does. So this is the original example, and using the program, and this is what it did for me using, and look at the title, the title of the piece. Those are the prompts that I used. Whispering Leaves. That was all I did. One thing. So quiet it down. Let's see what it will do. And I liked it. This one, Blowing Glass with Monkey Skull. Right? Using the same original image. So I figured if I could take my original work and see what AI can do with it, maybe it can give me a thought process that's unique from what I may have thought about before. Another example here. Put in abstraction and cubism as a prompt. We go to the next one. This is the original to the left. Digital painting to the right. It's inspired by AI, and as we go further, these are cubism and abstraction, surrealism and stone and texture, using that original image. So I was trying to find a way in which to put my own little twist on things. And if we go further, this is another example here. The original to the left, and the prompt surrealism and stone to the right. And I kind of liked it. This is the original sculpt that I did in a 3D program called ZBrush. It's a 3D sculpting program. So that's all sculpted from scratch. Then we go further to see what I did, used it for AI. So I'm always looking for ways to kind of put my own little twist on it. And I think we'll just stop there and go on the cast.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Lincoln.
All right, let's go ahead and go to the slide. The title of this piece is The Gift of Entropy. Hello, check.
Is it on? I can't see this.
Does it have a switch?
Down at the bottom there.
Check. Hello.
No.
It's probably the cord.
You want to use mine?
Push it in.
Check.
There.
Okay, how are we doing in the back? All right, the title of this piece is The Gift of Entropy. The piece points to the fact that entropy is ultimately the death sentence for the universe. Entropy is what causes our own bodies to fail in a myriad of different ways, and I will argue that it makes us selfish, manifesting in all the ways we try to hoard and control energy. We can see it microscopically within our bodies and macroscopically as a society. If you believe in a creator, then you have to realize that the creator embedded death into the fabric of the universe. Entropy comes from the same mystery as what drives a penny to land on its heads 50% of the time. I'm a mathematical visual poet, and I take math equations and insert concepts into the variables to use mathematical structures for poetic expression. In this piece, I've employed the similar triangle structure as a linguistic image schema. Similar triangles have a proportional relationship among the lengths of the legs of the triangles. As you can see in this image, side A is the side B, the side D is the side E. They're proportional. In addition, it follows that A divided by B equals D divided by E. In this expression, we are mapping nature is to the despot as the garden is to the slave. Nature is to the despot as the garden is to the slave. If we solve for nature, we can see that the value of nature is equal to the value of the garden multiplied by the value of the despot, and all of that divided by the value of the slave. To execute this image, I knew I wanted to show a snake from the Garden of Eden presenting an apple in its mouth. To solidify my idea, I went on the internet and stole this photo of a snake with its mouth open, which I could use and take an apple and use an affinity photo to translate the apple into the snake's mouth. I did this and was very pleased with the conceptual result, but I knew that I could not sell this work where I stole the snake photo. I'm an accomplished photographer. I could easily hire a snake handler, set up a table with lighting, tease the snake to open its mouth and shoot a photo. But at the same time, I didn't want to go through the trouble and the expense to do that. So I knew I could just go to a stock photo library and pay for a license to use somebody else's snake. Next slide. In this image, you can see a perfect snake that would cost me $90 for a license. But then I thought crossed my mind, why don't I check into these new AI image generators? Next slide. So I first went to DALL-E 2 and tried my luck and was not happy with anything. You can see they're not even close to what my initial vision was, which is one of the drawbacks of this type of software. If you have a clear vision, it's very difficult to get something. You can see in this image, the snake doesn't have any scales and the topology of the body looks like a donut. So it's not very good either. So then I went to Midjourney and tried numerous different prompts trying to get something superior to the others. Next slide. And you can see that I had plenty of failures trying to get a snake with an apple in its mouth. I decided to simplify the request and just get a snake with its mouth open. This looked great to me, except I didn't like over the top scary teeth. So I erased the teeth and shot a photo of an apple and then translated it into the mouth of the snake and drew shadows underneath it to make it look real. So this is an example of a thought process where I used the software to achieve my initial vision for the piece.
Thanks, Kaz. And our next panelist is Larry Vogel.
I guarantee you I have no math involved in mine. All right, so I'm Larry Vogel and I have a confession to make. I'm a prompt, and you also can join us too. I saw a lot of hands, people haven't played the game yet, but you're welcome to come and join all of us in this lifelong, I think what's going to be a lifelong pursuit of creating imagery. So, as you can see,
Are you going to become the first Prompters Anonymous?
so as you can see by the examples we've looked at so far, the process is very seductive, and you get drawn into it very easily, very quickly. But for me, I kind of had a similar reaction that most of the other people talked about. It was like, okay, that's cool, but what can I do with it? And so I decided to use it as a collaborative partner. So AI became my partner in the process, and I figured at my age, or as I get older, and in my economic bracket here, there's probably a lot of places in the world I'm not going to get to. But there's some ideas where I would love to be able to have some photographs. And so my first thought was, I'll probably never making it to the rainforest, but I have an idea for an image. So let me see if I can ask AI to create me a rainforest. So that's the image on the left. The image on the right is my composite using my photographs along with the original image that came out of Midjourney. Some retouching, color shifting, everything you see up there. So go ahead and go to the next one. This is an example of two images used on the left side. I think the prompts had to do with portal to another universe or something like that. And as you can see, even in the top one, the kind of portal shape wasn't even completely round, but because most of us are also all experts at Photoshop, I could always go in and take the original image and work with it. So I added the sleeping guy at the bottom and the flower at the top, some light rays, and combined all the images together to create this image here. This last one was the image, or next one is the one on the left, is the original AI image. I love the character. I thought the hallway looked too small, so I separated the character from the background, made the hallway bigger, added a little more smoke and foam, and put in the church in the background, which is one of my photographs. And the symbol on the back of the character there, I asked AI also to create a symbol that meant hope, and that's what it came back with. So I added that to the back of this jacket. So because I was so much into this idea that this is a collaborative project, I asked AI to show me their signature. And that's the chop that you see on the right. And when it came back, I go, that is cool, I love that. So I'm gonna take my chop on the left and we're gonna put those together. And then every image that I make, you'll see on the next slide, goes into the image in the lower right-hand corner. So go ahead. That's cool. And there it is. So each print that I make, I put the chop on the front of it, and when I display the images, they will always be displayed as a collaborative project. They're not mine by myself. My friend AI has worked with me. And that's my new friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, all. So we're going to start with some questions here, and the first one I have is for Memo, because you're the expert on AI. What is this AI that we're talking about here, and what is it not? What are people misunderstanding as well?
Great starting point. So first I would want to start by saying even the term AI is a very problematic term. There's nobody in the world who likes it. Even John McCarthy, the guy who coined it in 1955, even he doesn't like the term. Most people who don't work in AI probably think of things like, Stanley Kubrick's 2001 and HAL, they think of Blade Runner, C-3PO, they think of super intelligent robots, things like that. And that it's confusing when we say today, AI made this. No one really implies that it's a super intelligent or even intelligent being. It's just that AI is the name of a research field where we study the components required to make systems that might exhibit intelligent behavior. And this includes things like perception, pattern recognition, reasoning, logic, pathfinding, all kinds of things. That's why there's so many different branches of AI. One particular branch of AI, which has been there from the beginning, even in the 40s, Alan Turing was talking about it, but it's become really successful in the last 10 years, is a field called machine learning, which is, even in machine learning, there's different disciplines, but the one that is very popular today is called artificial neural networks, which you might have heard, which was loosely inspired from the human brain, but just inspired, and that was like 80 years ago. It really is nothing like the brain. It's about as similar to the brain as a submarine is to a fish. Like, that's about the commonality. And so what an artificial neural network does is it learns from data. You feed it data and it tries to learn things from it. And this has been around, again, since the 40s, but what's happened in the last 10 years is they've become really, really good. As computers become more powerful, as the internet collects more data. And one of the things that has happened in the last year, which is where this explosion happened, is around access and interface. The work that I showed that I've been doing, the way that I would interact with these neural networks is through code, like through pages and pages of code. So really only people who knew the maths and the code could work with these technologies. Also, the power of these models were not, I keep saying models, I'll come back to that. They were great, but not where they are today. And in the last year, what happened is these systems became super powerful, but also we gained a new interface, which is text. So text, or natural language, I should say. So when we have this new interface, which is natural language, all of a sudden the barrier to entry is just disappeared. So anybody who can speak, even pretty much any language, it's not even limited to English, can interact with these models. And one final thing I want to say, I said that these systems learn. I keep calling them models. What a model is you start with an artificial neural network, which is an algorithm. We don't need to go into the details, but we feed it lots and lots of data, and this learning algorithm analyzes that data, and it tries to extract hierarchies of abstract representations of patterns. It tries to extract some kind of meaningful information about how different regularities appear in that data, and how they relate to each other, and it creates a network of this. And we call this thing a model. Once it's trained, it's a model. We can discard the training data, we don't need that anymore, and then we can interact with this model and tell it to generate stuff. So I hope that was clear. I tried to summarize a lot in a few minutes, but I'm sure we'll unpack it in the next hour or so.
That's really helpful. That's very interesting. And this thing that we've been trained on Terminator and 2001 fiction and film about the worst things that could possibly happen in this intelligence, a sentient being coming out of this. And one way I heard it phrased recently, that we're not there, we're not even close. There's nothing with their AI will not, and I'd like to ask you to confirm what you understand of this. AI does not have any cognition, no conscience, and no creativity. Sure looks like creativity, but what did those three C's, what do you feel about where we are with those, or?
Well, are you asking me?
I'm going to ask you again.
So regarding consciousness, I think it's almost universally agreed that no, they're not conscious. There's a really great talk by David Chalmers, the philosopher of mind, who really analyzes why they're not conscious yet. Regarding creativity, I would argue that it depends on how you, it's a big topic, depending on how you thought about what creativity is. I would argue that they do exhibit creativity. What was the third C?
Consciousness, creativity, and cognition.
Yeah, that's also a very, it all depends how we define these words. A lot of people try to define them based on the mechanism that humans exhibit that behavior. So humans exhibit cognition via this mechanism or created by this mechanism. Therefore, unless it exhibits behavior with that mechanism, it's not cognition or it's not creativity. But if we loosen those definitions to be more inclusive, then I think one can argue that the systems do exhibit creative behavior.
But we're not anywhere close to sentience.
No. Well, close is a very subjective term. I don't think in the next 5 years, but who knows in 20, I don't know. I'm not saying it will, but.
The next area kind of related to this, it ties all in together. One of the big criticisms that has been out there is that these companies that have this stuff are scraping data off of the web, they're stealing our images, they're taking all of this information and they're feeding it into these databases. So we've had some conversations on this in the past few weeks about this idea of stealing. What is stealing? And I want to first direct this one to Kaz because he wanted to address this first, but I'd like all of you to kind of address your feeling about that term stealing and how you see this.
Now, machine learning is way more complex than what I'm going to talk about here. But in the context of prompt-to-image computer bots, machine learning uses statistical analysis to find probable patterns in relation to the words that describe those patterns. I think Memo had mentioned that earlier. What I want to stress here is humanity has always struggled with statistical thinking. For a mathematical paper was not ever even written on statistics until the late 1600s, some 50 years after Newton and Leibniz developed calculus. So humanity is really not, well grasping the idea of statistics. So it's also easy to forgive us for not understanding statistics because we tend to think in terms of just one thing at a time, whereas when you're dealing with statistics, you're dealing with many things at the same time. So let's look at the concept of averages. So if we take an average of three numbers, we'll say 10, 20, and 60. To get the average, we must add them first together. 10 plus 20 plus 60 equals 90. And then we have to divide that 90 by 3 because we had 3 terms. And so we get the average, which is 30. So what's important here is that 30 is not a copy of 10, it's not a copy of 20, and it's not a copy of 60. It's an average, it's in between. So now I want to do a little thought experiment with all of you here. So let's say that I'm going to give everyone in the room a palette of paint. And we're assuming most of you are artists. We're going to assume that you're all are artists. And I give you a palette of paint and I tell you to produce the perfect brown color. So everybody creates and mixes up their paint and produces a brown blob of paint and puts it on a canvas. Now we're going to have the machine learn what that brown color is and produce its own brown. So it goes through and it analyzes. We have over 80 people here, and it analyzes all 80 of these blobs of brown paint. It looks at the chroma, the value, the frequency of the color, all the characteristics of that paint. And then it produces its own brown colored paint. Now, did it copy? It didn't copy anybody. It produced its own color based on a statistical analysis of everybody in here. Now, here's the problem. Patricia over there says, hey, that looks just like my brown color.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Well, it just so happens that Patricia's brown that she created was very close to the statistical mean average of everybody in the room. So it gets really confusing. But I thought I would present another viewpoint of this idea of it stealing or not.
Stephen, how do you see this in terms of the way that we as artists borrow and take and appropriate and steal things from other people and incorporate them into our work?
Well, it's what artists have done all the time, since the beginning. Picasso was inspired by someone else or another culture and created his cubism and his style. We all do it. We don't create from nothing. It's not possible for us to. We create based on experiences, right? So what's the most important aspect of our creative lives are those experiences that we have. The more experiences that we have, the more we can share those experiences in our own unique way. So when Greg, I found out about AI when Greg asked Lee Cozy and I to have lunch because we needed to discuss this new thing called AI. I think it was like before pandemic, approximately. And I didn't know anything about it, so he brought his laptop, sat at the cafe, kind of showed us what it does. And I wasn't threatened by it because to me it was something that we were already doing as artists. It's like I'm taking images, mostly my own images, and compositing them together and creating something that, based on what I saw someone else do, or I saw another artist as a particular technique or an approach that inspired me. So I see AI as a source for inspiration. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Stephen. And Larry, your thoughts on it?
I'm going to jump back one question earlier because I think it's an unfair question to ask if AI will ever become like us. Do you think we'll ever become like AI? Can we do what it does? Probably not. So my answer to your question is I wondered the same thing when I first started doing this, and I came up with some very specific looking images. I'm going, this thing has to exist somewhere. So I put it into a few different reverse research engines, searching for the image on the internet, and not one image ever came back that I could say looked really close to the one that I got. So the end result is these images are unique in the sense that they are not being taken from somebody else's work. The real question or the idea of authorship comes down to borrowing somebody else's style. And I think that's where the big question is right now in terms of the law. But my understanding so far is that we cannot copyright our style. I also think a lot of people, when I was first shooting black and white 4x5 landscape, I can't tell you how many times I heard the comment, or I'm going to say compliment, gee, your work reminds me a lot of Ansel Adams. It was Was I stealing his work? No, I was inspired by what he did, and I took that as a compliment, that people recognize where my resources came from.
Thanks. As one of the things that Stephen and I were judging a category of digital art at the San Diego County Fair in 2018 or something like that, and we saw these images that were, they looked like they were painted by Vasily Kandinsky, if you're familiar with his work, abstract artist. They beautifully composed, beautifully everything was spaced, the line work, the color palettes were all Kandinsky. And we saw one, and then we saw another, and then we saw another, and we saw another, and we said, wow, on the first one, and then I recognized it as this, probably this AI thing. And Stephen, you want to talk about that, like, how do we deal with this, where there's an image that is created by pushing buttons, you upload a photo and push a button versus somebody who spent 30 hours working
Right.
on
I mean, I guess at the time, there were no rules that said we couldn't admit AI into an international competition. So I think we started to recognize that so many of them were so similar, we figured it was the same artist. We were able to judge effectively, but the problem is that what do we do, how do we handle AI in an international competition? He and I spoke with Lois, who runs the San Diego exhibition, and my suggestion to Lois is, because Lois decided that no AI is allowed, I talked to Lois and I told her that that's a bad idea. I think you need to create a new category that allows AI, because it's here to stay and it's not going away. I don't know much more. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this will be something that is debated in different venues. One of the things that we have to figure out as a society is where does this matter? The context. Why does it matter? When does it matter if it's AI versus not AI? And I want to just say, well, darn, that's a damn good image. But every time I see a damn good image these days, I wonder if it's AI, and I question, well, who did this person who put their name on it create this? How do you feel about that? Any of you have feelings?
20 years from now, we won't even have this conversation.
Yeah.
But then it's today. How
It'll
do
be
you feel
looked at
about
as a tool for digital work, and nobody's going to separate, oh, did you do this or did you do that?
I think exactly what you're talking about. When we take art out of our room where we work and the creativity that we all work with, we don't have any rules. We all work at home. We make whatever we want to make. I don't have any rules because I think any of these rules are just they're nonsense. I mean, the idea that we have any kind of rules or guidelines about what we can do creatively. The only problem comes when we walk out of that space and we hold it up for the world to look at and go, look what I did. And somebody goes, that's not art, that's not a photograph. You can't put this in my contest. I go, that's when the problem starts. Otherwise, I can do whatever I want at home all day long. And I get it, clubs and organizations and San Diego Fair, they have to create these rules because what starts happening is everybody wants to start going, well, that's not fair, what he's doing, that's not fair. And we heard it early on when it was like people still working in the dark room versus people that were working with the computer. That's not fair, look what they can do, I can't do that. And it's like, well, that's creativity. You get on board or well, I'll quote Darwin, you're gonna have to adapt or die, I guess.
Thanks, Larry. Emma, I want to ask, and I want each of you to address this if you have a feeling about it. What is the most innovative piece of AI-generated art that you've seen, or innovative use of?
So when you say AI-generated art, you were talking about specifically prompts.
Well, I'd actually open that up to a broader one.
I know this, we're trying to combine this inside of there, but I'd like also to maybe expose, because you especially had more exposure
Yeah.
to.
I mean, if you broaden it up, there's like so many projects that come to mind. Like I can think of an autonomous forest in New Zealand that uses blockchain and AI to kind of govern itself, like really conceptual pieces. But I think that might be a bit of a tangent regarding. So I think I just want to say, continuing from the previous question actually, and connect it, because I think it's very connected. Like, what is the point of a contest? And what are you judging at that contest? If you're judging painting skill, then obviously AI art shouldn't be in there. But if you're judging concept, like what is it saying, then why should AI art not be in there? So what AI art, so this generation of AI art, prompt-based AI art, is threatening, it is a threat to many artists who rely on their skill of drawing, because that is being replaced. But what it's doing is it's opening up a new battlefield, or a new, to carry on the Darwin thing, a new environment with new selective pressures for concepts. And the people you have on today, like all the examples that we've seen, they are, like the work that Stephen showed, and Kaz showed, and Larry showed, they're not, and the work he showed as well, they're not just a prompt. There's an idea, and there's a very unique process. And those are the artists who are, again, to stick with the Darwinian theme, who are going to survive in this new landscape. So that's not a specific answer, but a more generic answer.
Well, I think all of these answers, specific or not, kind of talk around the edges of all of what's going on in our heads.
Yeah.
Stephen, do you have a
Yeah,
innovative AI?
Yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to kind of, comment more on what Memo was just mentioning. A friend of mine, Brian Haberlin, who's a famous comic book artist, uses 3D and digital painting together to actually make comic books, sci-fi, fantasy, and so forth. We had dinner together and we talked about what's going to happen with this AI. How is it going to affect artists overall? And he said, look at the people that this art is going to make happy. All the people who could never paint or draw, always wanted to do art like that but could never do it, and now they can, and it excites them. He says, that's a good thing. So why are the artists who can paint and draw with their skill being threatened? Because now everybody can do what they can do. And it doesn't matter. In the future, it won't matter. I have always been a huge advocate that as an artist, it's not about your technique, it's not about your style. It's about your vision, who you are. Get it in your art so that no one can replicate it. That's right. A machine can mimic creativity, but it cannot be creative. Right?
Kaz?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I don't find it threatening people who draw or paint, because there's so many different kinds of aesthetic criteria that you use to judge anything. And when you're dealing with painting or drawing, you're using a criteria to judge that on painting and drawing. So you can't use the criteria for painting and drawing on digital art. I mean, Memo just said that a while ago. So it gets into this whole question of what is art, whether or not art is, defined as what Charles Bateau said fine art was: painting, sculpture, printmaking, and drawing, and everything else is out. And then we get into photography, and that's a debatable one. Painters would say that photography is not art. Maybe they would reluctantly say, oh, well, maybe it's art. But, they certainly wouldn't use their criteria to judge it because it would fail. So every different kind of art has its own criteria based on the culture of that particular style of art.
What do you, Larry, I'll direct this one to you. Do you feel like that there is some value that it is, like things that are more original have more value versus things that are mimicry, like a band that writes original songs versus cover bands?
Well, the cover band thing is a horrible example. I mean, literally, they are playing somebody else's music. But, so the idea of, again, the degree of difficulty of making something doesn't enter into whether it's a valid piece of artwork or not. My favorite example is Thomas Kincaid's thousands of hours that are spent painting those god-awful cottages in the woods, and then Motherwell does a simple, stroke on the canvas in a matter of minutes, and I would buy a Motherwell over Kincaid any day of the week. So, this idea, I had actually written a note here, I used the term, I think it's the fool's playground to even begin to define what is art and what isn't art. One of the examples I came up with was the idea, and my concept is, we've talked about this for so long now. I thought we resolved this issue. Duchamp takes a urinal, puts it upside down, sits it in the museum and says, here's my piece of art. And everybody wanted to argue whether it was or it wasn't. And he's definitely not the last person that did it. It's been done over and over and over again. But I think that is the statement, is that anything can become art. And I think it has to do more with the person who creates it, the person who decides to take it and set it on the pedestal in the museum and said, this is no longer a stump in the woods, this is now a sculpture. I want you to look at it and appreciate it from that perspective. You get to decide whether you like it, love it, or hate it, doesn't matter. But you can't be the one who decides whether it's art or not.
Because the next person's going to have a different opinion about it, and in a different context, you might see it as beautiful or not, or provocative, and art changes its shape depending on how you see creativity and something that moves you.
Well, like my last comment here was that, this idea that we need to resist that mentality of trying to define what is and what isn't. I try really hard, but I'm not successful at it either. So it happens. We all eventually love to point at something and go, it's not art.
You have to have a language to discuss things. So you have to delineate things. For me to say art cannot be defined, then it makes it meaningless. It takes the word and it just becomes a meaningless word. I think that there's nothing wrong with trying to define the boundaries of what art is and what art isn't. That's why we have language, so that we can discuss these sort of things. But to me, it's important.
If I may just add one little note there, I don't want to confuse matters even more, but the art critic Jerry Sells insisted on AI art. Of course it's art. It's just really, really bad art. So, I just wanted to throw that out there. He said we shouldn't be having a discussion, is it art? Because obviously it's art, as you were saying. But it's just bad art.
It's because we confuse the word aesthetics with the word art. Yeah, that's where it has. You have to drive a wedge between those two concepts.
Well, there's a lot of people who say if there isn't a person involved in it, and I have this voice inside my head at times, if there's not a person thinking through and putting their passion and their emotion into it, then how can it be art? Because we've had a context that's what art is, it's what aesthetics is. But
it gets back into aesthetics. There's aesthetics about a lot of different things. One of the things, like, that separates, this microphone's not working, one of the things is that we can deal with the aesthetics of coding, like Memo writes his own code for these sort of things. So there is an aesthetics in that we don't even discuss, So when you talk about a machine creating art, you also need to take into consideration what it took to make that art. There's a lot of effort up front that people are not even addressing.
I want to move the focus a little bit back to careers, and what do you see as being the biggest changes that are coming, and where perhaps there's maybe too much alarm? Let me start with Memo.
I think it's undoubtable that there is going to be a major shift. The shift is going to be in the skill set required. Actually, just yesterday I watched a video by a Disney animator, a guy who's been doing this for many years. He was on Lion King and Aladdin and this, that, the other. And someone was demonstrating all of this stuff to him, and he wasn't phased one bit. He was like, I've seen the time that we used to hand draw every frame. We switched to computers, we switched to 3D. But yeah, I love this. Like, he's someone who used to hand draw, and he was really excited about this. He doesn't feel threatened. He literally kept saying, this is no different to, we actually used to shoot. I think it was Mulan, we did a live shoot, and then we rotoscoped it, or we retraced it. So there was going to be a massive shift in skills. So people who rely on drawing will have a harder time finding a job. The same way, analogy I really like is, drummers. We still have drummers, but many people just use a drum machine. And so arguably the job market for drummers has gone down. But the skill set has changed. Another example, like the letterpress tray. No one uses the letterpress tray anymore. We still have typography, we still have typesetting, but we use InDesign, we use software. So the tasks are going to remain, but the skills are going to change. But the other thing is the number of people doing a task might be reduced, because one person using AI might be able to do the job of 10 people. I'm making these numbers up, by the way, but just to give you an idea that it's not going to be a one-to-one mapping. And we're at the beginning. Like, these tools are first generation. They're very hard to use, they're only text-based, and as Kaz's presentation demonstrated beautifully, it's difficult to control. Like, he couldn't get the exact image that he wanted. That's what's being worked on right now. Just yesterday, Adobe announced their own version of Firefly, I think it's called. So what I predict in the near future is the relationship between an art director and the designer. The designer is going to be replaced with AI. So you're going to have a person saying, I want this image, I don't like it, make the snake less scary. Okay, now put the apple in it. Remove these bits. So the same way that a director works with a talent. Another thing I want to say is, many artists don't even paint their own paintings, right? Damien Hirst doesn't, he does now, but for much of his career, Damien Hirst didn't touch a canvas, yet he sold paintings. In a way, we're replacing the art assistants with AI, which does democratize art making to a lot of people. People who couldn't afford a studio can now have a virtual studio. But it also does mean many artists got their foot in the door as being an assistant. Many artists, designers started at junior levels and worked their way up, but now we'll be replacing the junior levels with this, and I'll leave it there.
Thanks. Larry, we had a conversation about this topic with Tony Washington on the panel, and we tell that story about how he's using it in his job now.
Yeah, we had already kind of settled on the panel, and then when we had the conversation with Tony, it was like, oh, I wish we could add one more, because he is a commercial artist, and that's kind of really, I think, where we see probably the most threat coming towards the commercial market. And I don't think anybody's gonna ever stop painting or sculpting or doing anything just because there's a machine that can do something very similar. But Tony's story was that he was hired by a company to create an ad, and he does a lot of stuff. He's generating everything as digital art. So he's not doing any photography, he's not drawing by hand, it's all done in the computer. And he sat down with the director and they gave him a description of what they wanted. He went to work on it. In a short amount of time, he was showing them some proofs. And the guy says, wow, this isn't like anything we were really thinking about. And I think in the conversation, the art director said, you know, let's take a stab at this thing using AI. So they went in and started adding some prompts to AI, and it delivered back something that they go, yeah, this is like a lot closer to what we want it to do, what we want it to look like, but we think you could do better than AI. And Tony goes, well, now I completely understand what it is you're after. He went to work on it, did the job, and they were happy with it. In fact, they were so happy about it, they said, we're gonna pay you for the work that you did that we're not gonna buy. Which was really generous, I think, of the company to do that. And I said to Tony, I go, boy, I hope you see this as an opportunity as a commercial artist to go, my next job, I might say, hey, let's sit down with AI, let's do some talking with it, see what comes up, and it could save them a ton of hours. So, yeah, to me, it was an example of learning how to adapt to the process and work with it. And that was the idea too, was you think about who he is and what he normally did. Now he's already figured out a way to maybe become a better, illustrator and working with the company. And he may get more jobs than the guys that refuse it. I'm not gonna do that AI crap. Won't even do it. So I think it's, there's the adapt situation right there.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a great example because I've had lots of clients that have something in their head and well, let them do the work and find what the thing is that points me in the right direction if they like my style and I'm creative and I can talk them, hey, here's the rest of the story. You don't necessarily find junior artists who can fill or admin assistants who might be able to type in prompts that could filling out that story to get to the audience. Stephen, you're an instructor in the digital art realm. What advice would you give your students toward preparing themselves for this?
Thank you, that's a great question. So I've taught at Palomar College, I've taught at UCSD, I'm currently teaching at Golden West College and Coastline College. I've taught at Otis College of Arts and Design. I've also taught over at Santa Monica College. And right now, what I'm telling my students is, know your stuff. Do not slack on your skills just because you think a machine can do it better. Make sure your skills are solid and intact so that if, that's just stupid that I'll turn it off. So that when the client tells you, I want you to do this, this, or this based on this AI image that we have here, you have the skill sets to get the job done. Those who are going to survive in the business and make the most money are going to be people who know their craft. The danger with this is that most people are going to get lazy and they're going to let the AI do it for them. And they're not going to think about going back to school and learning how to prepare a canvas, learning how to paint, learning how to use a camera. Whatever skill set you choose, whether you want to be a sculptor, learn your craft and do it well. So that when AI comes along, you can do whatever you want and make it uniquely yours. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's what I tell my students.
Yeah, good advice, Stephen. Thank you. Okay. We are running, let's see. I have another related question to that, and then we're going to go to audience questions shortly. Do you see any new opportunities for particular jobs? Because one of the jobs that I saw listed was prompt engineer. How do you get what you want out of a machine?
Oh my.
So do you see any of you any other specific?
Yeah, you can actually use Chat GPT to write prompts for you.
All right. Well,
would like to open up questions to the audience now, and so we have some microphones to pass to.
Can you hear me? Yep. So Nathan, I was going to say got a lot of experience with AI. I'm a cybersecurity engineer, so AI is very much in my wheelhouse. My question is to Kaz, because you said you wanted to answer the is AI art theft. You said 10, 20, 60, the average is 30, and if we all painted brown and added together. You very eloquently sidestepped the question of is it theft. If we all painted brown,
Right.
knowing that we were going to make the AI perfect brown, we are willingly giving our artwork up to be made into AI generated art. Nobody owns 10, nobody owns 20, nobody owns 60, so nobody cares what the average is and if it's AI generated. How do you how do you view art knowing that it was taken from people without their permission to get thrown into a system for this to be made? I mean, that is art. I think we can all agree whether we like it or not. And those individuals who had their artworks stolen get nothing from it, and it's used against their permission.
Well, I think it gets into what is, stolen. You're going to get into a lot of legal battles, and there's plenty of legal battles going on right now with, what was it, Getty Images is suing Midjourney, so there's a lot of legal battles, but none of the dust is settled on it. And actually, Memo is talking with people, I think, on the highest levels of that question. But me personally, when we look at, you post something on the internet, everybody can look at it and use it as inspiration. The fact that it was mathematically manipulated, to me, doesn't make it stolen. That's just my opinion.
No. I want to very quickly add a point to this because it is such a raging important question and point. I just want to say, I've programmed these systems from scratch, so I understand exactly how they work as well, and I don't think it's theft. But I also don't think it's not theft. Basically, the word stealing is like an archaic word from I don't know how many thousands of years ago. Kaz was saying, we didn't have statistics papers until the 1600s. In the 1200s, no one would understand the concept of a standard deviation because it didn't exist. And that's where we are now, I think. We don't have the language to talk about what's happening because it just hasn't happened in this way before. Is it unethical? I think yes. I think it is unethical for companies to make money off the back of people without giving them anything back. So yesterday, Adobe announced their version and they're trying to make it better. But it's a question that needs to be resolved. I don't think the question, is it theft, the right question, because then we end up fighting, it is theft, it isn't theft. Whereas there clearly is a problem, but it's not that it's theft. It is my opinion. So may that get resolved. Then we need the new language.
Let me add some components I think is part of this. I think money is involved in art. My background's more on economics. I didn't hear anything when you said digital AI. I didn't hear credit cards, Zoom, and digital information. In other words, if I'm a creative artist or a creative company, I need a creative artist, I have artists around the world in the millions, some people making $1 a week who are willing to do some of the work for me. So why would I go pick someone from Santa Monica who wants to charge $1,000 for it when I can buy it for maybe 50 cents in Singapore or somewhere nearby?
Well, look at what happened.
So I'm just saying, does that get pulled in when we talk about AI and AR creative work. Thank you.
Absolutely it does. I mean, look at what happened to photographers. Photographers are making six figures a year at one time, and then when digital cameras became available to everybody, where does photography go now? Now they're starving. So it's just the consequence of technology.
Not so much a question as a point of view. If I make
Try it.
an exact copy of the Mona Lisa, I stole it. If I take something 10 different paintings, I can steal it. I'm making my own creation.
I get asked my question. You handle this.
That's a very important point. It's like you're not copying exactly. If I copy Star Wars exactly, I'm in trouble. But if I take something from Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, it'll be a really good combo. Story.
I would say to that, again, like what Memo said too, is we've learned how to speak over many thousands of years. And the idea of stealing is one way of putting it. And there's the saying about, thieves steal but artists appropriate. The idea of appropriation didn't exist thousands of years ago, but yet we now all understand what that means. And the idea of stealing the Mona Lisa, I mean, not the actual piece, but we look at it, Salvador Dali and all these other people did things with the Mona Lisa. They appropriated the image and they made more or less a joke about it. But it was still the idea that it was taken from that original piece of artwork. So should they have ended up in jail or,
Well, that legally, parody is completely acceptable to take something and make fun of it, to change it enough to make a joke out of it.
Hi, my name is Lana. I'm
Hi,
a
Lana.
digital painter, specifically working in the field of fantasy illustration and game art. I was wondering why you guys didn't bring anybody in here that is more strongly against AI-generated images. It feels a little bit of a biased discussion.
I'll answer that one. So originally when we started, I brought up the name of Stephen and Greg because they were two people that were totally against it. Or not totally, I'm gonna say, just in discussion, I had this impression. And the interesting thing was even Greg talked about where he was before we got here. I would say in a matter of months, both of them, I have a different attitude from them. The very first AI image I put up on Facebook, Stephen's response, he was the first one to respond to it, and he says, "Bad Vogel, bad." So I thought, there's our guy, there's somebody on the panel who doesn't agree with this. But I think by the time we got here, they did, so here we are.
What I had hoped to highlight in my intro was that those doubts, I don't want to take one side or the other. I go through those doubts and that back and forth and demonizing it at times in my head. And I think to have any that's my creative mind, is I try to look at all different sides of things, and I think that's what I've found in my conversations with all of these folks, with just trying to look broadly at what art and technology is. And no, we don't have words, like they've said, we don't have words to quite figure this out, but that's why we have these conversations, not coming in with somebody who's particularly negative, but it's a good point.
I have a question for the young lady too, that asked, why do you feel you needed someone to be against it?
Well, my entire gallery was scraped for the Lion data set without my consent.
Okay, so your gallery is what? Where is it?
Stolen?
From where?
She's online.
Oh, from DeviantArt.
From DeviantArt, yeah. Okay, makes sense. But yours wasn't the only one, right? Everybody else was too, right? Yeah, I understand.
That's where my concern comes from, is it really ethical to benefit from millions of artists whose works were compiled without their consent? As Memo said, he feels it's not ethical, and that's the first comment I've seen that questioned it in this discussion.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Sidney Wildsmith, and I'm 74 years old, and I've been doing art for 74 years. I've been doing professionally art for about 50 years, and in that time I've done hundreds of images, starting with pen and ink, working through, now I've done major works as a landscape painter in oil. Okay, I was an artist in residence in 7 national parks, and so I'm a pretty serious working artist. I've heard about Dali, and I was invited to participate. I thought that's gonna be fun or interesting, and so I did. And from the first moment that I typed in my words and I got a response, I was absolutely blown away. The images were so incredibly complex or interesting. There was not, and over the next 3 weeks, I did 1,200 images. That's 4 at a time. And with very few exceptions, they were really amazing. I found it fascinating for me as an artist to be able to go into the interiors of the pyramids and have images made. But here's the point. So at this point, I've spent 50 years crafting my skills. The thing that's challenging in a really weird way is the way in which, not to criticize putting up a word, but a 6-year-old kid can do that and end up with brilliant work. Brilliant work, okay? Endlessly. And that's where it's going to be going. And so it becomes, I mean, historically, much of the professional art has been based on the artist, and they start when they're 20, they're successful, and then for the next 50 years, they're successful. Whether the art is good or not, the people collect it. I think there could be a change now coming, where it's going to be less about the artist per se, and more about the art that is produced, okay? And to say, that's really good art. Yeah. And this person did it. But there'll be a shift, I think, in that direction.
So it's going to force us to start thinking deeper.
Right. Oh, and I found it, for me, it was absolutely, to me, I should be upset that some 6-year-old kid could do what I'm doing, okay, with really well. But for me, it's fascinating. It's a journey. It's a whole new journey.
Did you have a question?
Oh, I'm
Did you have a
sorry.
question?
Please respond.
There's no response.
Hello, I'm a designer and a photographer, and the gentleman's comment about the Mona Lisa made me think about it a little bit. Immediately we said, you sit down in front of the Mona Lisa and you paint it, you're stealing it. And I don't think that's true. I think the issue comes when you say, this is the Mona Lisa. And I think that might be something that we're seeing in digital, or in AI-generated art. This idea of fraud, that, you know, people who do spend many hours putting in the work to create a thing, there's that sweat equity inside that piece. And sometimes when you're looking at a piece, sometimes part of the enjoyment is realizing the time that's gone into that. And when, I'm not sure where I feel about AI generated art at this point, but I do feel like there is an element of fraud to it at this point, but maybe that's mostly because most of the stuff I've seen is bad. You guys feel that has some kind of weight with how you think about
You have to understand also, and Larry made a very good point, that good art is not based on time. It's never been, ever. So, but no, I hear what you're saying. But to insinuate that is probably a bad habit to get into. Because good art comes from the heart.
I'm not trying to insinuate that. I'm a photographer.
Right.
You know, like I've felt you're not making real art because you just click the button.
Right.
You know, like I felt that. But what I'm worried about is like that idea that that because it's taken from so many things and it's so easy, and we're saying that it's the same thing as this other thing, is that a type of fraud?
That's something that we all gonna have to come to terms with at some point, the courts, the public, the artists, everybody.
If I may quickly respond to that as well, I think it's a cultural thing because photography would have had the same thing, right? And you as a photographer, you're sitting, you're just clicking a button. And actually things like Instagram allowed many people to become, well not now, but when Instagram was first out, it was more a community around people interested in photography. It allowed a lot of people who weren't photographers to make art with a camera. And we're at that phase with AI, or prompt, let's call it prompt art, especially because there's this ethical dark clouds over it. And also, especially because a 6-year-old, it feels like a 6-year-old could do it, because different to photography, you do need a bit of skill to take a nice photo, whereas with Midjourney, you don't need anything. You can get a nice image out of it. A 6-year-old can get a nice image out of Midjourney. So it is uncharted territories. I don't think it's fraud if, like, within a few years, I think that the landscape will settle a bit and our eyes will be a bit more trained to differentiate what a 6-year-old did versus what Stephen did. Whereas maybe right now, because it's all so new, we can't differentiate, you know, Jackson Pollock from a bucket of paint spilling on a canvas. But we will become accustomed to that, I think. I agree.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Rosa. I'm an artist and a writer and a teacher. And my question is this. Is AI, artificial intelligence, philosophically speaking, a universal concept or a particular concept?
That's a good question. Depends on who's programming it.
Because you've been talking, speaking in 2 levels. So can we create something like this, universal or particular or both? Or both, yeah.
That's an interesting question because a lot of the art I've been seeing that's been generated by AI has been work that's almost European centric. And there's a lot of different cultures out there. So this is gonna change in the future. I think it's gonna grow and change. I think it's gonna help enlighten us as artists, and it's gonna change.
With a codification.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing we do see is that, I think to understand is that every single one of these image generators, no matter which company it is, they all have a bias because it didn't learn on its own. There are people who are training it what to do. And if you've looked at enough of them, you start to recognize a style that Midjourney produces and a style that DALL-E produces. And I think that, again, to understand that idea that it does have a bias based on who trained it. And so it will change. And already, I mean, we're already on the 5th iteration of Midjourney right now. And to think where it started to where it is today, it's still like people are, like early on, if any of you had played with it before, you know, the hands were ridiculous, which also is, to me, is like another example of if it was stealing art, my God, it'd be able to make better hands, but it didn't, right, until they actually trained it to make better hands. So it's still getting better and better, but just that idea, I don't know that anybody has answered your question completely. I don't think it's a great question though.
I will add, if I understand the question correctly, I'm a professor at UCSD, and I have a Chinese student, a PhD student, she's fine-tuned a model of stable diffusion on Chinese landscape paintings, and her research is on Chinese landscape paintings. And actually there's 2 students that are working together, and lots of interesting questions around, say, perspective. Like obviously Western art, we think of single point perspective, and that's like one of the important aspects of Western paintings, whereas in Chinese paintings, it is no single perspective, and there's a whole philosophy around why they don't paint single point perspective. And so she's using Stable Diffusion, a custom model that she trained on thousands of, because she found that none of these models, DALI, Stable Diffusion, or Midjourney, could create Chinese paintings. So she created her own, building on Stable Diffusion. So, I mean, this opens up a whole can of worms around whether this technology should be open or not. She was able to do this because Stable Diffusion is open source, whereas famously Midjourney and DALI are not. But I just wanted to mention that. So when the technology is open source, it allows individual pockets of people to develop it in the way that they see fit.
Does everybody know that Adobe just announced the beta of an AI paint program? Yep.
China's coming up with
3D models. You can paint something very quickly, push the button, and it'll generate something for you using AI technology. It was just announced as a beta today.
Yes, I did. First of all, I'd like to mention that I think a lot of the questions that we're saying was kind of answered in that, can remember back in the digital time when we kept having arguments, can this really be photography? No, it can't be shown because it's digital. Remember, we were in Digital Art Guild with that. The other thing is that when you can look at something and say, that's Kandinsky, it's just bad art. I mean, if you're going to use AI, you're going to have to, as you mentioned several times, create the skills that makes it something unique, and that is going to come from what we all know as creativity, heartfelt space, etc. And the idea of that we won't have painters, we won't have sculptors. When I was I almost got a majors in ceramics at one time, one of my lower graduate terms. And people, then when they were so worried, you go to the store, you buy dishes so cheap, but you pay a whole lot more money for a handmade thing. Then when I taught black and white photography, which I love, and digital came in, I had to protect my black and white room because they wanted to throw it all out. And then when we go to lectures, and you've seen this, Stephen, people are talking and you're mentioning the zone system, they're going, what's the zone system? And they're photographers, and you go,
My students don't even know who Ansel Adams is.
Yeah. I mean, and even burning and dodging, they didn't have the background that it have coming in digitally. So I think that gives, when you were talking about the need for education, but one of the things I saw in your work, which I felt was fabulous, I thought, boy, if I had the classroom, you used your shape, your composition, and then you used it in several ways, which was such a great way to show composition, because this works, because it's composed right. So I don't think we have anything to worry about. We don't even have to go into it. We can still be painters if we want. What I do think we have to worry about is what you addressed, that we do not have the right to steal, pardon the word, we defined it. We do not have the right to just take her work. And not
exploit, maybe.
Exploit is the best word. Actually, that really is. Exploit artists and not in some way either compensate them, or at least I like what you brought up, with at least giving them a little bit of credit with maybe their chop or something. So it's something we're just going to have to accept. It was like when we had to go to the computer. I remember not wanting to do it. It was like, why do I want to? Because it was so bad, for one thing. They gave us computers, and we couldn't talk to the rest of the college because we had Macs and they had PCs at the time. Remember those days? Yeah, I couldn't even send a message to somebody. So it's just, yes. Well, no, it was more comments, really, because I think the question is what we've been addressing, and Greg has brought up so much, is that we're really in a movement. There was, the Industrial Revolution, the computer generated, there's these industries that are going to come in, and when we look at AI now, in 20 years, we're just going to go, oh boy, what's that coming? Don't you think that's kind of where we are? We're really neophytes now?
That is correct, but it's the period, the transition period, which is going to be painful. It's like any transition. You know, in 50 years, obviously no one will be thinking about this, but right now and in the next few years, a lot of people are going to be very positively affected, and a lot of people are going to be very negatively affected. And yes, there's loads of positive things. I mean, that's why I got into the field. But I also got into the field because I knew it was coming and I wanted to understand what's going to happen. There is going to be lots of negatives. Like, there's lots of negatives to it as well. And in this transition period, it is going to be painful for a lot of people. I think we can't deny that.
And a more dynamic change technology, when it comes fast and it comes hard and it makes this big of a change, we always end up in this gap. How do we describe it? How do we think about it? How do we talk about it? What do we do with our laws? What do we do with our institutions? And our brains and our social bodies don't keep up with this stuff when it goes like that. So we have to catch up and figure it out and make sure that people who have worked really hard don't continue to get hurt by it, and then we figure out some way to and also encourage those people to figure out how to use the skills that they do have to continue to find opportunities, to use the creativity to move forward.
What other questions?
Don.
So I get the advantage of having listened to much of the conversation. I have to say that in response to the gal over there that said, where's the naysayers? The missing component here is freaking humanity. Now, those of you who know me know I'm an artist. I get what's happening here, but I'm hearing, and I think it's important for you guys to hear up there, that a mantra of, well, we're going to have to get used to it. It's going to happen. It's happened before. That is not acceptable. Let me give you a couple. You're going to laugh at this, and in my own way, I'm going to prove my point, because you can't laugh at AI. If an AI produces something, it doesn't get laughed at. It's not an entity. The other day I'm looking at the video and I'm seeing Tom Cruise. He's making a movie. It's the most incredible thing you've ever seen. The guy jumps over a bridge this is in Mission Impossible. He performs this stunt himself 150 times. Very dangerous. I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I'll watch that movie because there's part of this guy's soul here. When you turn on the tube, for goodness sakes, and you watch The Voice, if I put the most beautiful voice ever up on the stage and it's just there, the human part of you doesn't care about that. You need the backstory. So I'm merely suggesting that perhaps we've glossed over the question about this is the Mona Lisa. Does the Mona Lisa mean anything to anybody? Well, sure it does. It means something in a different concept than what a lot of you guys have been talking about. AI, in my opinion, and I'm looking for a response here, but AI and humanity need to be separated. Just like the comment about can you or can you not define art? The answer is, of course, you must define it. It is a word. And can you define and separate AI from humanity? So I'm speaking up on behalf of humanity, saying here, no, there needs to be a little pushback on some of the sort of, well, it's just going to happen, and we'll all get over it.
But I think you're agreeing with us. I think you're agreeing with what we've been saying all along. You have to separate AI from humanity. Because you use AI as the inspiration, you use the humanity to put together the vision, the feelings.
Well, go ahead, Mel.
No.
I would say the idea of even separating humanity from AI is impossible. The idea that we believe it's going to function on its own, it's not going to affect human lives.
It's not.
Wait. The idea And somebody had given me this example is, I can go down to the grocery store and I can buy a cake mix and I can set it next to my stove. It's never gonna become a cake unless I actually become involved in it. So I don't think that the intent here is to be flippant about the idea that, yes, this is going to affect the livelihood of people, as well as everything always has. The story of the lamp lighters, I think probably this great example that has come through this, that eventually all these people, their job was to go out and light the lamps every night so the city had lights. They're no longer in business anymore. And I used to do color separations for a living. That doesn't work. There's no job for that anymore either.
My comment wasn't directed to, in fact, I want you to rethink what you just said here. You said, I don't think we should even posit the question of the difference between humanity and AI. At its soul, that is the essence of why we're here. We're not here about making $25 on selling something. The gal over here that had her artwork appropriated, those are peripheral to the basic foundation, the philosophy behind what we're talking about. So I'm not agreeing with you there.
I'm not understanding your word soul.
But you could also make that same argument about digital art in general. It's all computer, machine made. The humanity's not even there. So, and you're a painter, so I can understand you.
So I'll finish with this question. Do you all feel that to have a constructive conversation about AI and art, we need to foundationally discuss how humanity itself affects AI? Yes or no?
I guess my question would be why?
Well, and why the reason we're here is to learn and explore and think. And that's the answer to your question.
I think that I think you're right, that there absolutely needs to be conversations about humanity and in the way that, how do we deal with technology? How do we adapt? How do we govern ourselves? How do we think about, because it's us taking care of ourselves. And knowing that this technology is something created by humans and it has impacts, positive and negative, and this is an ongoing conversation. I think what maybe was perceived as flippancy about it is that there's an acceptance that it is here and we've got to deal with it, but part of that dealing with it, from what I think about, is it's here. I've got to do everything I can with this to be a better artist, to make better stories, use the time that instead of illustrating, use the time to write better human stories, and make things that are more beautiful and more meaningful and purposeful, and encourage other artists to use that in their work, make things better in your workplace.
Okay, we're almost out of time. I want to give this
Okay.
Thank you. For questions.
My name is Kat, and I'm part of the Artist Alliance. I'm thrilled with this conversation we just had. But I wanted to observe and comment on something more than I wanted to ask a question. And that is, as artists, we've all been creative our entire lives. And I really think it's great if a 6-year-old can use this AI and make art. I follow a boy on multimedia on social media that is designing and making clothing for people. I know girls that are 10, 13 years old and they're singing opera. So they still have years to develop their craft, but it's not less important. And as artists, I think we have to allow everyone to have the tools that are available to do whatever they want to create their art. That's all. Thank you.
Amen.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you to the museum for having this, and to our panel. All the volunteers working here tonight. tonight, and for all of your comments, for being here, for listening, for having an interest. Keep your opinions coming and thinking about this stuff. I'm definitely willing to talk to any of you who have other questions afterwards, and I want this conversation to go on in other places and other venues, and it's all really important to think about it and think about how it's impacting us. I would also want to encourage everybody to go out there and learn what it is if you haven't played with it. Learn what it is, figure out how to be creative with it. And you don't have to if it doesn't move you. There's, but I think speaking to the humanity thing, which I've been thinking about this a lot for the last 4 months, it's how we approach it and how we reach out to other people and learn to collaborate and have these conversations and teach each other about what this is and how it is impacting us. So going back to this thing here, is AI creative or destructive? No, that force completely lies within us. So be creative. Thanks.